I think we're gonna get things started now. Very exciting webinar that we have going on tonight. I have my tea ready for sit back and watch this presentation, and I'm very excited about the information we're going to receive. We're going to do the PowerPoint now, so next slide, please. Hello, everyone. My name is Robin Holmes, and I'll be your moderator this evening. And just to give you a little description of myself, my background is white. I have long dark hair with a white straight down the middle. I've got some earrings on. I have a black shirt on as well. I work for Saskatchewan Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. I work for families who have deaf and hard of hearing children. And that's one of the reasons why we're having these webinars. I just wanted to start this evening with a little bit of a land acknowledgement. Today, we are acknowledging that we stand on the land of Canada from the west to the east, and from the north to the south, and all across Canada. Today, we're here and we honor the diversity of the Indigenous people, their contributions that includes their resources, their minerals, their trees, the water, and so much more. So we need to always remember that we have the opportunity to reaffirm our relationship with one another, and we're committed to moving forward and working together. Again, I would like to thank you, and we acknowledge that they're standing on the land today here in Saskatchewan, Ontario, and also all across Canada, BC, to a variety of different provinces. And we have special visitors today from the United States as well. Thanks. Next slide, please. This webinar is in a collaboration with Silent Voice and Saskatchewan Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. If you have any questions or you need to make if you have any questions or comments, you can always email us, and we can, at this email address listed here, and we can always highlight some more information for you. Before we start tonight's webinar, we just wanted to, a few housekeeping things what we wanted you to know. That the PowerPoint and slides, we will have that on our website. It's being recorded, and we will be posting that to different websites as well, like YouTube, for example. This is a safe place for parents who have deaf and hard of hearing children. We've allowed professionals to join this environment, but this environment is for specifically parents of deaf and hard of hearing children. Also, I would like to introduce our presenters for this evening. And when that is done, we'll have some wrap up, some questions and answers, and then we'll wrap up and call it a night. So, are we ready to get this going and see what we can learn tonight? The topic tonight is family language planning. And this is for deaf and hard of hearing children that are being raised in multi-language backgrounds. We have Dr. Christy Batmula, we have Dr. Julie Mitchner, and we have Dr. Bobby Joe Kite joining us this evening. So please help me in welcoming these three lovely ladies so they can do their presentation to us. All right. Is one more joining? There they are. Okay. Here's these three ladies. And I just want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's a very special evening, and you've got lots of important information to share with us. And parents are looking for a variety of different resources. So we're very grateful that you're here today. I'm going to turn my camera off and turn the floor over to you three ladies.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. And I'll start with the visual description of myself. I am a Caucasian woman with brown long hair with a green shirt. My background is gray on the top and white on the bottom half of the wall. And then maybe I'll pass it on to Julie to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Julie. I too am Caucasian. I have glasses on, a watch on, I have a dark shirt, I have a white background, and a table off to the side of me here. Christy?
Yes. Hi, I'm Christy, and I'm a Caucasian woman with blonde hair down to my shoulders. I'm wearing a black short sleeve shirt and I have blue earrings on. My background is a little complex. On one side, I have a blue wall, but I have a white shelving unit behind me with a variety of different items on each of the shelves. Perfect. Now we need to talk about with the whole family language planning what it is that we do and how we support children in their home. And I'm sure people have a lot of questions. But as a research team, we also have a fourth member who wasn't able to be here this evening with us because of a personal conflict. And her name is Candace Jones. She is a doctoral student in the Department of Education at Gallaudet University. So the four of us have been doing research in this topic. And maybe if I can go to the next slide. Great. So we'll do the intro, which we've just done. Then we'll talk about a toolkit that we have and how to use that toolkit. And then we'll do a snapshot of our research that we've done and where we've arrived in terms of what we found, and then a question and answer period of time. And then we'll have some points for reflection. Okay, so from here, I think it's important before we dive right in. I think it's very important that this concept originated quite a while back when Christy, Julie, and myself separately were working on our dissertation. So we were working with different families. My focus was with hearing families with deaf children. Julie's focus was deaf parents with deaf children, but using a cochlear implant. And then Christy's focus was on immigrant families that have deaf children. So we had three different aspects for our dissertations. But we did get together and we realized that we had some commonalities in our work in that families use different languages in the home, whether they're spoken language or sign languages. And we talked about how do we then have the families working together? And there was a kind of this struggle going on. And that was the catalyst of having a small study, doing a pilot study, and then from there, moving on a bit further. And then 2 years ago, we applied for a grant through the Canadian Hearing Services, CHS, and that allowed us the partnership that we developed, and we did a larger research team. So of course, more money means that we could work with more families. And if you look at the pictures, our team expanded at that point. So we did diagnostics and data and interviews with our team. Most of them are graduate or research assistant students.
Yeah, and just to add also the funding grant that we received, we can explain a little bit more about that and the findings that we found along the way, but that funding really allowed us to develop the training and set up the models that we're going to expand upon a little bit here down the road. And so it's for families in Canada and the United States. So it was really nice to partner with CHS and to be able to move forward in that research in that aspect.
Well, thank you. Next slide, please. So it's important to look at the work that we're doing isn't just sort of a standalone situation, but it's working with families who have deaf and hard of hearing children in the United States and now Canada. And we wanted to develop a toolkit. And the reason that we felt this was very important is because we needed to have language goals to then help the families identify what their values are and how they're going to continue with those values in language acquisition. And having deaf and hard of hearing children, quite often that creates a little bit of a kerfuffle in a family, and they may not know what to do with typical hearing families that have a hearing child, they don't really think about how their child is going to pick up one or two languages. It just happens very organically. But when you all of a sudden have a deaf child born into a hearing family, sometimes people don't know what it is they're going to do and how they're going to approach it. The other point is that family language planning helps to map out how they will achieve language goals. You know, who's going to do what, who's going to be involved, what resources are available, what is happening in the home, and how do they set things up so they can achieve their goals. And the third point is that language decisions affect long-term communication. And we know that it affects the emotional development and connection with their family members. And it really helps the family to document that and have a plan so they can support their goals within their family. Okay. Well, family language planning, you might be wondering what that actually entails, but really it's looking at the intention. You know, if we look at the language in the home, people think, oh, that's pretty easy. You know, yes, I can support sign, I can, support a spoken language, but it's really hard when it's not intrinsically part of a person's life. If they don't know any sign language, how do they intentionally plan to incorporate that in their life? So we encourage families to really think about the intention. What is the value for their language use in their home? And with the goals, they need to be realistic goals. They need to match the family. They need to be doable goals in how they pick up the use of their language. It has to deal with every daily routines and language building because children need to have concrete relationships with the information and it has to meet with the child's interests. They have to make connections with their world and their environment. And the fourth category is we have to always reflect and revisit different areas, make some tweaks and changes so that it's still working and matching what the family's goals and intents are. All right, I think I'm going to pass it on to Julie.
Yes, we worked with many families and over the years, and often they want sometimes two different language goals, sometimes three that they want to work on. And we're like, how are we going to help these families support these goals and have that intention in terms of how they're going to learn language? So we want the children to develop those skills in a few different languages, but the big question again is how? How are we going to be able to moderate that, provide some tools for these families, and that's why we set up a language, the family language plan. And the more we learned about families and their values and their needs and their beliefs and what languages they wanted to focus on, we were able to identify and have a bigger picture in terms of, oh, okay, this is how we should maybe tackle the language that they want to focus on for their child. We want to focus on the family. We want to focus on not only
What we've
language, but we wanted to focus on their belief systems, the family's experience, how the child is growing up. Things might change over the course of time. So their beliefs, they want their child to, for example, let's say they want them to speak. They want them to learn speech, but maybe the child does not have access to speech. So then, the plan has to change to support how that child's going to be successful. And you have to learn from where the child is at and their skill level. So, in order to put things down on this family language plan, it really made it kind of clear how we're going to move forward. So we needed to find out what the strengths were of the family. For example, the family, if they wanted to work on literacy, we needed to add that. If they wanted to add cooking into that, we had to take that into consideration. Or language, the language you use to do the cooking within the kitchen with the family, and what skills does each family member have that they can bring to the table to support the child and the family in developing these skills for the child. So, in terms of what the child, their skills were at, we wanted to have the family perspective as well, and their perspective on the child and what they were seeing within the home, and how they were doing at school and their programs that they were involved in. We wanted them to be able to self-reflect and have a look at that throughout the course of a month or two and see where they're at. Are they, is it their home language? Is it language at school? What is exactly that they're looking for to develop language at when and where? So we had have a schedule set there. We had a daily schedule as the first part of the plan. So the first column is, what are we doing right now with language? What we want to make sure that we have, maybe, I don't know, are we doing too much? Are we only focusing on English? Do we want this a balanced language plan? So that's what those columns are about there. And then we decided that we needed to have, in terms of having that balance, at the same time, we wanted it to make sense. Who is this plan for? Do they have access to speech and language if they have a cochlear implant? Do they have access to spoken language? Is it going to naturally, organically happen through the day? And do they have to follow that plan? Is it written in stone? No, it's something that's very like a living document. It changes over time. And so we tried to make sure that we kept language and life very simple in this plan. So we tried to set it up goal-oriented to help the parents along this journey, and also to be able to visually see what was going to transpire. Like, let's say it's dinner time and we have everyone around the dinner table. Is that access? Is it an accessible time? Do they sign at the dinner table, or are they speaking at the dinner table? And we also had family that spoke not only English, but they spoke another language. Other family members spoke another language, second generation or first generational families were speaking a different language. So we tried to keep that into the back of our mind as well. Do you think I need to add anything else to that? I just wanted to show.
Well, just to add to that, the family language planning isn't just the responsibility of the family, but it's part of the team. With the early intervention professional, there could be specialists who are involved. We all need to sit at the table. And if we have the data and the assessment information, the family is a part of that. They're not just at the receiving end of what the professionals decide upon. I think it's important that we meet the needs of the families and what their belief systems are so that we can move ahead with them, not telling them what to do.
Right. Sometimes they might want more ASL, or maybe they might be looking for a class or some type of, whatever the exposure is to the home language. It might be spoken language connected to the race and culture that they're coming from. So we needed to be able to provide that as well as an option into the plan. So we needed it to be able to match the needs of the family. Is that all good? Okay. Next slide, please. So here we added an example of one particular family that they spoke Spanish in the home. The grandparents lived there, and they had a strong Spanish culture. We had a 3-year-old child with a cochlear implant, and they wanted to be able to have access to spoken English, American Sign Language, and Spanish, spoken Spanish at the same time. So the family was very clear on what they wanted. These 3 languages: ASL, spoken English, and written English as well, and Spanish. And they want the child to be able to, move very fluidly between these languages. They wanted the family members, they have lots of community connection in the Spanish community. So the grandparents often were taking care of the child, and they wanted to be able to, focus on their language as well, not just American Sign Language. They wanted that language acquisition to be happening as well. So they wanted exposure to ASL, English, and Spanish. And they wanted to support that language acquisition with the cochlear implant, that spoken language piece. So those 3 languages were very important for the family. This was the family strength, that they were a very close-knit family, and they wanted the opportunity to be able to share responsibilities with each other. They cohabitated together. And so they wanted the grandparents actively involved. they're very family-centered family, and their values at dinner time. They like to break bread together every evening and share cultural experiences around the table as well. So it was very good for them to have that routine of what it was going to look like at wake up time and at breakfast time and at supper time and at bath time, bedtime, what it was going to look like. And early intervention services were involved to help with language development, to do some mentorship, to have some ASL classes offered to the family. You know, every area has different support services so that people have to check in with their area to see what they have. But they had mentorship, they had one-on-one, they had different ASL classes that they could take a part of. And then at home, they would have some language and they would practice at home. They would go to church. That meant they were getting exposure to Spanish language, going to church. And at ASL, they had ASL library time, and also there could be Spanish speaking at a different time throughout the day. So we had that big picture of what their beliefs and their values of their family were, their strengths and their goals and intention for their child, and what they were bringing to the table. So with that in mind, then we were able to set up a family plan for them. Let's go with the next slide, please. So this is what we set up after knowing all this background information about this particular family. As you see, we have the activity during the day. So we had wake up, breakfast, outdoor play, crafts and games. We could do a longer day. We have longer day schedules, but for this presentation in particular, we thought we would just cut it short to give you the example of what it looked like. We can do it weekly. We can do it during the school day. We can add that into that, whatever the program is that the child is involved in. But this is just a few examples for you to kind of get a sense of what this would look like. It looks like it's not emphasis on spoken language all day long. There is a nice balance. There's a balance of American Sign Language in there, some spoken English, some spoken Spanish. Again, that fluidity of going back and forth through the three languages. You just want to keep it realistic, so wake up in the morning, who's actually in the house at that time? The kids are there. um, maybe hasn't put their cochlear implant in at that time, so maybe that's the time that ASL is going to happen. That'd be a good time to, good morning, the good morning song that we sing to our children, and they could practice those kind of signs in terms of how that song goes. And they can practice that with the song, and they could practice the signs. And it would be something that would happen routinely throughout the week and the month. And they could start to build some vocabulary and some rhythm and get some access to language and language acquisition in American Sign Language. And then, of course, at breakfast time would be in spoken English or in ASL. To have different models. We don't want anything left out. We don't want to avoid that. We want to avoid that. We want to have access to any language that's going on. So what they're listening to or taking in, we have to be very sensitive to access for that family situation. And it's mealtime too. So it's nice to have posters around the house of the signs, sorry, ASL signs for food, signs for the foods for them to start practicing the different fruits and the different vegetables and the different kinds of food they'll be eating. Let's say there's the sign for apple. We'll have that up on the wall for them to see. And then now it's time for outdoor play. And outdoor play, that might be a good time for spoken English. That's a natural kind of organic thing to happen. The child will have their cochlear implant in and they'll be playing, and then they come back home and maybe they enjoy crafts and games at home, and that might be something that they are doing with their grandparents in Spanish. That might be a great time to take advantage of that time and do some games in Spanish. And it might be like a card flip game. It connects to what they're learning in the morning when they're learning about fruits in the morning. Maybe it could be the fruits in the afternoon, but in Spanish. And that could be, flip cards where they see the Spanish word, and then the grandma can say the Spanish word for strawberry, and the child will be able to make that connection from in the morning we talked about strawberries in sign language, and now in the afternoon we get it in Spanish. And then again at bedtime, it might be spoken English, or it could be in American Sign Language, it could be in Spanish. Maybe Nana will join when it's bedtime, and we might get English spoken by mom or dad, and then we'll have Spanish. So that oscillation between those languages will again organically happen. It's not just one language that's happening. It's a rich vocabulary from three different languages and three different cultures, and it matches their beliefs and their values and the intent for the family for language learning. And each one of them is individual. Each individual comes to the table with a different goal, and yeah, to partner with those services that are available in your area.
Great. It might feel a little bit overwhelming because you might be at a point like, oh, what do I do now? But first, what we do recommend is if we are working with the early intervention team, whether it's speech therapy, the specialist for the early intervention team, maybe a sign language specialist, ASL specialist, but we would work with the team and have the team help us out. But as family members, what can you do? And that's what I'm going to focus in on right now is what we see the steps are and what it could look like for your families. So you know your family, you know your child, you know what you want. And to be honest, sometimes, you know, as parents, like sometimes we're busy and we're managing the whole household that, some of the details don't always get looked at. But this is a process where we can step back, look at the values that we have as a family. What are our belief systems? What do I actually want in my home? It's taking the time to flesh that out. In my own home, we use different languages in my own home. And then I'm thinking, oh, okay, what does that look like? Because sometimes in our home, we kind of follow the rules. Sometimes we're in the spur of the moment. We might be using one language, somebody comes in and we automatically switch. And we need to talk about what that actually looks like. And in your own home, you have to identify the languages that you use. And I think it's really important to understand it's not just your home, it could be your whole family dynamics. And family dynamics isn't just maybe your blood relatives, it could be your neighbors. I mean, they're part of that family unit. There's your schools and your community, the babysitter. There's other people who are involved intimately with your family in your kid's life, whether it's close friends or extended family. But we have to look at what that actually looks like for the child. We also look at the routine. Once again, sometimes it's really funny because life happens. But generally, what does the routine look like? But it tends to be, Saturdays and Sundays, like weekends are very different than the weekdays. And when a child is new to the world, your routines are different. As they get older, it's different. You're looking at daycare, you're looking at babysitter, you might be looking at schools and who's looking after the child if the parents or the adults in the home are going off to work. So we have to just assess what the routines are. And that's what Julie was mentioning, was it's really important that we identify this because it's a crucial part with our planning, because we want to make sure that planning applies to your actual everyday life. Because for me, sometimes I get busy and I forget what I'm working on. Like I might say, well, I want to work on this, I want to work on that. And then, yeah, I'm going to do that tomorrow because something else came up. And I'm going to do it tomorrow. Something else happened and I got distracted and I couldn't do it. that's life, but we want to talk about a plan that actually fits with your life and how you run your life currently, so that you don't actually have to change and make special plans to do what it is that you want to do, but we want it to fit with your everyday life. And the fourth thing we mentioned was within the community, what are the resources out there? And what do I want to have in my home? What languages do I want to use? And it's based on the community. There could be something crucial for the family within your community.
Not only in the community, but for the average child, doing the things that they do. It's not just you doing it at home alone, right? It's to be used out in the community as well.
It takes a village to raise a child. Okay, so next slide we have up here. And step two is just talking about knowing your child. But when you consider language planning for my child, once again, you have to focus in on what does your child like to do? You have to have them motivated and buying into what you plan. If in that moment they're obsessed with cars, then take advantage of that. Match whatever activities you plan with where their passion is. It could be books in different languages that you want to use as your resources, something to do with trucks and cars or transportation. And then looking at their current communication strengths. And that's, I just really want to point out that kids will navigate language the best way they can. When I look at my own children who are hearing children, like when they were younger, I could sign, but they would respond back in spoken English. So it was trying to figure out what would work better and then how they learned to navigate that. It wasn't wrong with what they were doing, it was how we were progressing as a family. So I didn't want to become frustrated with that, but we have to look at the kids' strengths and what we can work on and improve and then go from there. Figure out the different situations. What situations does your child communicate very clearly? What situations do they then act out? Maybe they are upset or having a tantrum. There's a different way that they're communicating. And looking at milestones, because if you look at different milestones, what are they currently doing? And once again, it could be an outside specialist that can identify the various milestones where they're at or where they're wanting to get to. Like before, maybe they had one word utterances. Now they have two word utterances. Or perhaps before they were kind of babbling in sign language, but now their signing has become more succinct and clear. So then always looking at what you want to work on and delineating those steps. So back to the point I was making about setting up goals. With our initial research with this one family, that was a multilingual family, they talked about not realizing what that would actually look like. They just go ahead and they use their language in their home, but they needed to stop and think about what was the value, what was it that they were wanting, and it helps the family understand what's happening in the home and are they progressing to maintain those goals. For example, if they said we have a family member who speaks French, but our family speaks English, but that family member's not here. We don't see that family member very often. And I might just say, I want my child to learn French. I mean, that's a good goal, but how does that work if there's no exposure in the home? So we'd have to look at how we intentionally make that happen and how we incorporate language in our lives. So once again, the goals it looks like it could be complex, but really it could be really simple because we need to use SMART goals. The S standing for specific, M for measurable. Like, how do we know if we're achieving it? We have to figure out how to measure it. And the A being attainable, you might have a goal, but it might be such a huge goal, it might not be attainable. So you have to create smaller goals that you can attain. And then when you attain one goal, then you move on to another. Then R, is it relevant? Does it apply to our current daily situation? And the T, it needs to be time-based. So looking at what is happening, if we're making a goal that's, a 2-year goal, I think that people might lose interest. But we need to be time-based, time sensitive, and say, okay, in the next 2 months, this is what we'd like to work on, A, B, C, D. Okay, next slide. So this is an example of a goal. So just stating in the next month, our goal is to incorporate 5 new ASL signs to be used during breakfast. It's a simple goal and it's very specific. We're having a clear focus, and those signs can be used at other times. It's not saying it can only be used at breakfast, but if it's food signs, then we can make it applicable to what's being eaten. If there's a baby, then it might be bananas, and then we talk about bananas, and the next month it might be a different food. We could say, well, the baby really wants a banana. There's a banana over there, and they're pointing. And it's like, okay, we know that they want a banana, but I'm not going to give them the banana right away. I'm going to encourage this young child to show me what they want in a visual sense and help them do the sign for banana. They might do a different type of a sign, like an approximation of the sign. Then you give them the banana because it's close, because it's an approximation, and you work towards improving the actual clear sign. And they can say, I want the banana, and it's the appropriate sign for it, not an approximation. Okay. Now, step 4, the point is, language happens on a daily basis. And Julie was pointing out that whole daily schedule, what happens, and looking at who's around in the daily routines. In the morning when a child wakes up, who's there? What adults are there looking after the child? And which day is it? Like, not every day has to be identical. Maybe Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday, it might be one person. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, it could be somebody else that's waking the child up. Whatever that looks like for your family, there isn't a right or wrong way of approaching this. It's fitting in with what your family needs. It could be the nature of how they wake up. Maybe they don't have their hearing aids or cochlear on, and when they wake up, they feel comfortable signing. But you might have the right person there that is strong in that language that they prefer first thing in the morning. But you'll figure out what works best for your family and for your child. And that's the same thing throughout the day. In the afternoon, if you're going to the school, you take your child to school. When school's done, you pick them up. What does that look like? Who are they with? In the evenings, looking at that again, looking at daily life. And Julie talked about, dinner time and sitting around the table, having conversations, and what that looks like, what the bedtime routine looks like, and looking at other ideas. At bedtime, it has a lot of possibilities, or during the day, during playtime. There's different things that you can do, and you can apply the various languages depending on the activity that you're doing and who's there. So if we're playing with cars, one day you might be playing with the cars, and we might be using ASL classifiers. Other times we might actually use spoken English to talk about the cars. The cars are going very, very fast, and giving a lot of words that describe the same thing that you talked about before in ASL. And when you look at how you expose them to the particular play, but you can use different languages for the same information. So they would know the content in ASL, they would know the content in spoken English, and they might know the content in French. So it reminds me that if we only use English during reading time and we don't use any ASL, then they may not get the concept that they can read books in ASL. So we need to be able to use different languages if we're using more than one language in the home. Okay. So back to the breakfast discussion. So it talks about using keywords, bedtime, using alternate books that we might just alternate between the books. It could be the same book in different languages. We could do that as well. So we just have to think about what that looks like for each of the families. And what we do, what we want to make sure is that we match what your routine is. So what does your breakfast routine look like? What does your evening routine look like? Sometimes in my house, breakfast looks very different because it could be a rush to get out the door. Sometimes they have breakfast at daycare. They're not even eating breakfast at home, and that's okay. Once again, the plan of the family, the goal of the family planning is to make sure that we are meeting the needs of the family in the situation that they're in. Okay, step 5 is to reflect and adjust. This is one of the most important parts of the process. And the reason I say that is there isn't a right or wrong answer because we don't want people to think, oh my gosh, I just failed or I bombed at this. And that's not a thing. You can't fail at this if you're trying to provide language. We just have to reflect and adjust. If somebody says, I want to use French in my home, and then there's nobody around that speaks French, and they might have some exposure to French, but we can just talk about maybe currently that isn't meeting the needs of our family. That's okay. And we can make plans. If somebody really, really wants that, then we have to look at other resources that are out there. You need to ask yourself, okay, what's working this month? Or with the family members who are working with your family or professionals, you have that discussion. What's working? It's important to look at what you're doing well. You also then need to look at what are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that are not going as smoothly as we had anticipated? And we've been switching them out on a daily basis. What is it that we're doing? And then we can talk about what are we going to try next? Do we need to write new goals for next month, or do we want to just revise the schedule? Do we want to change things up because maybe it looks different during the school year or summer vacation? So we can always modify and change things. It's not hard and fast. The intention is to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the family, because if we set something up and it's not meeting your need, we need to reflect on that and we need to adjust it. But don't wait till the end of the month to do this. We can do it on the fly. I don't suggest changing it every day. I think that gets to be a bit much where, oh no, we're switching this and every day it's a new
Mhm.
schedule, but maybe give it a shot for a week or two, see how it's going. And then if it really isn't working, that's fine. We'll switch it out. We'll try something else. Okay, back to Julie.
And for the language plan, like we said before, it's a more of awareness and things that you're considering and reflecting on. And sometimes you don't even realize it when you're in the moment that things are happening. And then it becomes a little clearer as you get through that fog that, oh, this is the goal. This is really what we want to see happen. This is where we're making that connection, and then you can find the resources that you need to support that language plan, and everyone can work towards that goal. Just a short story about what we've learned from our studies. We were doing some data collection on 26 different families. 10 of them were from Canada, 16 from the United States. And we were asking a variety of questions about their beliefs and their experiences and their goals and what language supports they were looking for. And, we really focused on the families and families using sign, plus families using English, and also alternative languages as well. And the families they had great plans for what was gonna their daily plans for what was going to work for their family. They really had a great connection with their children. They were able to communicate, make those connections. That's the important part of it all. It was just really great to see the growth and development. The journey is a little different for everybody, and the path is a little different for everybody, but the family and the connection and the support is key. And you don't want things to, and yeah, things can be overwhelming, and you're getting different information from different professionals. Should we use ASL or should we only focus on English and only spoken English? And yeah, families are getting mixed messages. And what's best for your family is a question that we kept letting families know all the time is the answer really is what's best for each individual unique family. And we just saw that families, they really wanted a language. They really wanted them to have a language and support the language use. And this was a really good tool for them to use to move forward in that process in terms of having a language plan. So thanks for CHS for their help and their grant and the support that they gave us in this research because we were able to develop this family language plan.
Okay. Like you are not alone. It's really important to look at where you get support from your community, where you can get resources from. It could be from a language support group, a library, a support program. I think just to back up, the work that we're doing is just from our interviews with those different families, but we're looking at the basic foundations of language acquisition. So over the last 20 years, we have a lot more information how deaf people acquire a language. Prior to that, there was a thought of, well, how many languages can a deaf person learn or can they even learn? But over the last 20 years, we have more and more research that has done a lot of brain imaging studies about what actually happens within the brain, where you look at sign language, spoken languages, being multilingual. But that information has helped and supported our work. If a child has a rich language foundation, whether it's in signs, a spoken language, but if they can be interactive in a language and have everything within that's relevant to them and have rich language, and that's why we say that you can use materials, like if you're talking about fruit, it can be in many different languages because it's based on the content and the context of where the family that child is growing up in. And we have to look at, like, families sometimes get mixed messages, why are you saying this or why are you saying that? The bottom line is we're just saying language acquisition. It's fine to be multilingual. A deaf person can learn using different modalities. Deaf and hard of hearing children can learn more than one language, but you have to have a strong language foundation and have something that's very interactive and rich. And you have to have the resources in place. We have this QR code, which has a listing of, okay. Sorry, that's distracting, the noise. We have to make sure that we have the content and information, and we want to document information. This is a live document and we can add to information to it. We do have some families that we see in the States. Sometimes you see these influencers that post things and we'll put that down. But if the person has an audience and they have a public Instagram or Facebook, it's like, can you share that? We say that, yeah, you can share information. I think it's important that families can see other families going through struggles that are very similar. It might not be the same, but it's very similar. And they might say, oh, they did this. Maybe we could do that as well.
I was also going to add that in the chat too, that they could take a picture of that. Uh, I put that in the chat. The link is in the chat as well. I put that in there.
And also to know that families that are from diverse families, there's a lot of role models from different backgrounds. So it's really to be looking at role models, influencers, different people who are deaf, that families can connect with these other people who are doing amazing work. I think I'll move back to you, Bobby Joe.
Okay, and before we close, I just want to make sure I know you're probably thinking about lots of other things. What's the next step? What do we do? Where do we go from here? Just wanted to, you know, maybe it is that you're just adding one new sign every day, adding that to your routine, or maybe you're going to try one bilingual activity next week. Maybe you want to check into what is having that language conversation with your family and seeing what their beliefs are and how they want, what goals they want. And you can put it in the chat if you want. I'm curious to see if where your thoughts are on that. Next slide, please. And here we are, perfect timing. So we're going to close soon, but we are now going to open the floor for questions and answers. And if there's something that you want to ask, please feel free. You can turn your camera on if you want. I do see somebody on, so if you want to speak, that'd be fine too.
You can
Or
also type.
you can type it in the chat too. Either or is fine, whichever you want.
I have a question slash comment, I guess. This is
Can now just if you hang on a second, we'll get you spotlit.
I'll turn my
Oh,
camera off
well,
soon.
we'll get the okay. That's better. Okay, the interpreter was so tiny. Okay, go ahead. You can ask your question.
this is Brittany and Megan Hanchik. So we're a married couple. My wife Megan is deaf, and we are doing fertility treatment. We're planning on having children. So this is why we joined this webinar. So we're actually coming at it from the perspective of how can our child communicate with their new mommy. So it's sort of from a different lens, but I found this really insightful. Do you think that this framework that you offered still applies to it from this lens, or would we
Yeah.
have to adapt?
No, the answer is definitely. Um, Julie, I think you just you start with this form. You talk about what your goals are. What languages are you wanting to focus in, and what are you going to use on a daily basis with your child? And depending on the child, is the child deaf? Are they hearing? But just to visualize what the plan is, because if you're wanting to have a balance of ASL, English, or some other spoken language, you have to look at what makes sense for your family. And then you can fill out the rubric based on what your needs are in your family.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Thank you.
I think it's the family language plan is really designed to match whatever your needs are. You can, it doesn't matter if it's deaf parents with hearing children or hearing parents with deaf children, any family who wants to develop language of any sort. It's any language. So it's really developed to really match the families and where they're at.
Yeah, and I saw somebody make a statement that it's basically 50-50. There's a Gina was talking about the language, is it 50-50? And it really depends on the family. Is there an
Mhm.
opportunity where you can split up the language exposure 50-50? Sometimes it might be hard to do that. It depends on the resources, it depends on the connections, it depends on the child's activity. One family that I was working with, it's a deaf family with two deaf children. So they also knew sign language in Peru. So there was exposure to Spanish, Peru sign language, and English, ASL, all that exposure. And then as they got older, what they noticed is that they needed to work on their English. So then the focus changed for literacy goals as they got older. So that changed the focus of the family. It really depends on where you are in the various skill levels. If there's a lot of spoken language and not enough sign language, that's where you might have to be aware and cognizant of how much you want to bring it in. And it might be a challenge to totally balance it 50-50.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think I
Appreciate
see Sana. Sana, I see your camera's on. Did you want to say something? Sana? Hello?
Hi. Can you?
Do you have a comment or a question? Is there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, hi, how are you guys?
Good, very good. Thank you. Good,
Yeah, we're
good.
good. We're good.
I'm the father of Ash. Yeah, right on. I'm father of Ashwa Amir. She's 10 years old daughter. She goes to Henry Jansen for hard on hearing classes and all that. So my question was, being a parent, or what can we do at home in order to get more communication with our child and with the school? Like, we're trying to learn the sign language. It is helping, but other than that, like, what extra activities can we do in order to have more conversation with our child?
I think that's a great question. And I think you're on the right track by learning language, and you want to be able to communicate with your child. And language is important, obviously. Um, you can, gesture to, through games and find out what their interests are. That's very helpful as well. Also, with your family learning sign, you could ask, who's ever teaching you, the signs for what your child is interested in. Maybe it's cooking, or if they want to, you want your daughter to help you with things around the home. You could provide a list of things like that that you could learn, and add those experiences to your language base and have that connection. And then you'll be able to make a better connection through language, through communication. I don't want you to be too focused on language in terms of what's the sign for that? We don't know the sign for that. It's better to have the inclusion and have the connection and try to figure out a form of language together so that you can use even if you have to jump between something written or something visual, or show pictures and then a sign, so that you make that connection, whatever works. And over time, that development will take place, and the improvement in language on everybody's part will take place, and it'll just happen kind of organically if you're open to however language is going to happen.
And I think, if you're taking advantage of ASL classes, there are things that you can do via the internet, depending, I'm not sure what area you have. Are you part of a class, maybe with silent voice? I'm not really sure if you're taking ASL classes. Are you at this point?
No, we're not. Yes. What's his name? No.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, we're trying to communicate the ways school demonstrates and all the the stuff they send home. So in the beginning, it was very tough, but now, as time progresses, since she's developing her skills too, and we are on that track too. So yeah, it's coming along.
I think the point here from tonight and what we're trying to impart upon you is that the first step is that you're here, and that, you have a language plan. If you want, you can have that discussion with your family on what resources do you have, what different organizations can you get in contact with, and find some resources in your areas for that support that you're needing. Maybe there's a deaf family in the area that has a deaf child that maybe they could come together and play with your child, or if there's videos you could watch, or if the child wants to watch a movie. With them, and they could, you have those conversations of what your daughter's interested in, and then you kind of grow from there, right? You see what their interests are, and then figure that language piece out as you go. I think I think just having those thoughts and contemplating that awareness of you need that language to move forward is a good place to be. It's a good starting point.
Megan shared a point in the chat, so talking about access you might have for resources.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I did this. Somebody just messaged me regarding that that silent voice Canada program. So yeah, we will definitely look into
Yeah,
it.
reach out to them. Yes, for sure. I think that's perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect. Good move.
right on.
Any other questions? Oops, sorry, Barb.
Any other questions?
Unmute.
Okay, the question was like 100% with one language. Is that possible or not? Well, with the family language plan, we're talking about multilingualism. It's like, how do we, when families want to use more than one language in the home, what does that look like? And that's what our focus has been on. If you're wanting to be monolingual, then you have to figure out what language is it appropriate for the child? Is it appropriate for the family? You have to look at how the dynamics are and if the child can actually acquire language. If it's an English only home, does the child have access? Do they have access to spoken English? If not, then you might have to reconsider it and look at adding an additional language. If some people say,
kids pick up in, and we want to take the last one from someone on the chat here. It is. Oh yes, yes.